A test can hardly get any more intense. How good was the Suzuki V-Strom 800DE really? The answers in this video. What a journey. We crossed 4 states, we were able to enjoy absolutely intense landscape experiences. We crisscrossed Wyoming, Utah, Montana and Idaho for you. Well, I actually did it for myself, but you've also become very dear to me, dear 1000 PS community. And I kept thinking of you whenever I was in the saddle, trying to explain why this Suzuki V-Strom 800DE gave me that feeling of safety and composure on this Wild West tour across America. On the one hand, when I was choosing the bike in advance, I already knew fairly well what we were in for. We'd have long stages, 300 kilometers plus, and those stages would include on the one hand proper off-road, but also gravel roads. Really, 80% off-road, although some of those gravel sections let you keep relatively high average speeds. So in my research, I was, of course, saying, okay, I need a motorbike on which I can also handle long stints in the saddle comfortably, while on the other hand, still having the toughness and the composure you need out here in the rough wilderness of the Wild West. So the choice fell on the Suzuki V-Strom 800DE. First off, the heart of it, the engine. The engine is just a twin-cylinder, the sort people always called the budget units because they supposedly couldn't afford V-engines and the like. But this twin from Suzuki, with balance shafts and a newly designed overall layout, is a modern power plant. They've managed to give it an incredibly composed and comfortable running character. It would never even occur to you to think mid-range. You simply glide along with such composure, it's properly brilliant. And it's a joy. You feel that life in the engine, that presence, but only in an entirely positive way. Absolutely no unpleasant vibrations. You always know where the revs are, you know where the torque sits. It gives you a really good feel, yet that calmness and composure make it super comfortable even over long distances in the saddle. The throttle response and the power delivery are genuinely at a very good level too. We even caught ourselves at one point saying, well, a little more power would be nice, because when you really twist the throttle, it doesn't quite pull as briskly at around 60 miles an hour anymore. But then when we later analyzed the trip, we realized we were at about 2,600 meters above sea level. So of course, when you're higher up, carrying a lot of luggage and facing steep climbs, you do sometimes think, yeah, a few more horses would be handy. But overall, that was the only time during the whole journey when we ever thought, okay, maybe another 10 horsepower would have been nice to have. Apart from that, you're always sitting in that mid-rev range. And that full, easygoing torque really helps you place the motorbike exactly where you want it. On those brilliant gravel stretches, you know exactly, right, that's how the engine responds, that's how the torque comes in. You can just let it flow a bit, works perfectly. In tighter turns, when you need to lighten the front wheel a little, it handles it beautifully. And on the other hand, there's that sense of composure when you're cruising along the motorway and just need, say, a traveling speed of 70 or 75 miles an hour. All of that's spot on too. Now, it has to be said, the testing conditions are a bit different from what you'd have in Europe. On a European motorway, you might well be running at around 150 kilometers an hour for a longer stretch. I'm not sure whether that would start to feel a bit strained. Perhaps our German viewers can comment below on how it feels holding a steady 150. But with the steady pace we were keeping out here, it really was the perfect choice, that relaxed, easygoing engine. And since we're already talking about the engine, let's be honest and talk about the electronic rider aids too. You've got a full electronics package on board with 3 riding modes to choose from, 2 ABS modes and 3 traction control modes. You can select the traction control in gravel mode or switch it off entirely. Honestly, by the 3rd day, both of us had started riding with both the ABS and traction control permanently off. They work well. they're a great safety feature, but in principle, we only deliberately switched them back on when it started raining and we were on wet asphalt. The gravel mode is nice, a good aid if you're not that experienced, helping you stay stable on gravel, and it makes drifting a bit easier too. Still, if you're an experienced rider, you'll end up switching them off at the end of the day, because you want that freedom, the ability in a tricky section to deliberately let the rear wheel step out a bit. And of course, the gravel mode can't predict that's what you're about to do. So yes, seasoned riders switch it off. They'll also appreciate that once you disable the traction control, it stays off for the rest of the ride. The ABS, on the other hand, has to be turned off again every time you switch off the ignition. I did think to myself at one point, well, it's a bit of a shame really. You've got all these rider aids built in, they cost money, and yet we end up turning them off. But when the rain came down in Yellowstone National Park, I did have to admit, yeah, actually having the ABS and the traction control there wasn't such a bad thing after all. When the asphalt's wet, when it starts resembling a mirror, in those conditions, it wasn't such a bad thing after all. I switched everything back on, experience or not. Although I've got to give credit here to these Dunlop Trailmax Raid tires. You can probably see it in the footage. They're proper chunky off-road tires and the look alone really sparks that sense of adventure. They took us through every off-road section without issue, and on tarmac they offered loads of riding fun. Stability, smooth running and comfort were all spot on. And even on wet asphalt, in combination with the rider aids, they provided exactly the level of safety I needed. They use a silica compound, so while they look like full-on knobbly tires, they actually include silica in the mix, which means they're also suitable for cooler temperatures, and we definitely had plenty of those, as well as wet tarmac. Speaking of cold weather, that's when I did start thinking, yeah, a 900 GS or perhaps a KTM or Husqvarna would have been a bit nicer, since heated grips now tend to come as standard on most press or test bikes. And on BMWs, they always do anyway. This American test bike from Suzuki America is clearly equipped the way they usually have them over there for local journalists. So with a quick shifter, but without cruise control and without heated grips. And at 1 degree in the morning, with a layer of ice on the seat, I really would have liked to have those heated grips fitted. I know they're available as accessories, but I also know they're rather expensive. And honestly, that's one of those gadgets you really do need in practice. I don't know how some people can say heated grips are for wimps. We're often setting off at 7 or 8 in the morning, and up at 2000 meters it can easily be 1 degree. That's just how it is. So for me, heated grips are a must-have on any motorbike that's got the word adventure or touring in its name. And the Suzuki V-Strom 800DE is, without question, a truly excellent touring enduro. So what else makes it such a great travel bike? It was that combination of fabulous ride comfort with agility and sportiness united in a trio that's hard to match. Honestly, it's a dream. You sit on it, you feel the saddle and it's right, just right. Comfortable, not too squidgy, very nice. You sit here and we had stages of 10 to 11 hours, of course with breaks and so on, but loads of saddle time and the riding fun was still there. It wasn't just passive cruising. We sometimes really got a move on the gravel sections, pushed on off-road. And that's something the Suzuki V-Strom 800DE does really well. Better than some larger touring enduros. Better even than Suzuki's 1050, this blend of truly superb touring comfort with the sportiness you need to devour the odd rooty trail or rocky stretch. You've got a good enduro standing position, a good seated position. You can drift nicely on gravel. You can glide on the motorway. Absolutely brilliant. And what really stands out to me the most is that we've had some seriously long days on this trip. It's been going on for quite a while now, 4 states already, and yet every single day my satisfaction in the saddle has grown. That's something special, because with some bikes, the more time you spend with them, the more little things start to bother you. But here it's been the opposite. Every day I've liked it more, felt more connected, and thought even more intensely about just how brilliant it is. That calmness, that composure combined with sportiness. And yes, of course, some people will say, well, it's got around 10 or 15 kilos, I think about 15, more than, say, a Tenere. And it's also heavier than a KTM 890. But when I looked closely, the rear subframe, the bolts, the main frame, the engine mounts, I thought to myself, for a trip like this, Crossing the Wild West, I actually appreciate that. Because out here, the next dealer really is a long way off. And it can happen that you take a tumble.
Boah, das Drunken leckt mich am Arsch. Ah, 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 ah. Alter, wie bist du da durchgekommen?
I just want the maximum chance of carrying on after a spill without the trip ending and me having to wait a week at some dealer because of some stupid little part. I reckon the nearest Suzuki dealer is now 3 days of riding away. That's just how it is here. We're in Montana now. Montana is as big as Germany and has 1 million inhabitants. So the dealer network here is a bit thinner than back home in Europe. And for me, that was fine. I'd rather take a motorbike that's built that way. I've got to know the Suzuki folks in Japan by now. Not personally, but I know how they think. They are very conservative. The most conservative of all the Japanese manufacturers. Everything's a bit safer, a bit heavier, but also tested a bit more thoroughly. Just looking at that rear subframe, I'd say I wouldn't survive the crash that it would. So for this journey, it was exactly the right choice for me. If, when it comes to weight, you have extremely high demands, meaning you prioritize low weight, and you're not so focused on that robustness, that tank-like indestructibility, the whole zombie apocalypse survivor vibe, then there are better options. But if that toughness, that rough and ready character, that ability to take a beating is really important to you, the V-Strom 800DE is a fascinating choice. The suspension is still very Japanese. In fact, it's Showa, so yes, really Japanese. But also soft in its base setting. We opened it up even further because on those washboard tracks you simply need that plushness. Even so, it was still cool enough on asphalt. Some people might say they want it harder and firmer. Those are probably the riders who only ride very sportily on the road. There are likely enduros or even different concepts that can do that better. After all, this is still a motorbike with 220 millimeters of suspension travel and no adaptive suspension. That's got its pros and cons. It's a simple, robust setup, also a more affordable design, but of course the downside is that it's a compromise. And if, like us, you need that level of ride comfort, then even with the suspension cranked up, you won't get that firmness you'd want for jumping motocross tables or blasting through a series of fast switchbacks. Otherwise though, around 220 millimeters of suspension travel is a good balance. A bit more travel would have been nice now and then, but then I think it would start to feel a bit like a rocking horse. So as it is, it's a really good compromise and perfectly suits its purpose as a touring enduro. You can take it on an ACT track, you can ride the kinds of sections you see in these shots here, and for proper hard enduro stages, you're better off with the smaller DRZ 400. But I deliberately didn't choose that for this trip because in terms of range and those long stints, it simply wouldn't offer anywhere near the same ride comfort. A quick word about my kit. The demands were really tough. It had to be light for the flight luggage, light for daily use as well. It had to be comfortable enough that I could wear it day to day because everything I've brought for the 10 days is on the bike here with me. It still had to be versatile enough and give me that freedom of movement because I'm riding sporty enduro sections in it too. I went for a Vanucci suit. You've got the links in the description below. I have to say with the trousers, the membrane sits in the middle layer. You can get a bit of ventilation going by opening this here. Fine, you can get some ventilation with the jacket too, but at high temperatures, around 30 degrees, the ventilation concept reaches its limits. And I have to say what I didn't like was that these ventilation zips, especially this one, are barely possible to open and close even when you're at a standstill. And then when I try to adjust it while riding, don't even think about it. You can't set it up for yourself on the move. Practically great are these here though, the outer pockets, and here. Now I'm looking for my phone, but it's in a different pocket, I think. And there are ventilation openings at the back as well. So it's a good all-round bit of kit. We've ridden from 0 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius. Freedom of movement is spot on, but as I said, at very high temperatures the ventilation concept reached its limits. And with the boots I made an odd choice this time too. They're relatively short boots. They're the only boots I've got with me and they had to go in the flight luggage. They also double up for dinner in the evenings. So I haven't brought the really heavy enduro boots. They fell victim to logistics, but they offer superb support. They don't offer the same level of protection as proper enduro boots, but they do provide the comfort I need and just enough safety that I can live with it in good conscience. Now, we've also got the SW Motec rear bag on there. In its maximum setup, so here in the 34-liter configuration, it looks quite tall, but because of that it's also very narrow, so the thing stays mounted on the bike for the entire trip. And when we are spending a full day in the same accommodation, I just strap it down lower. Then it's about half the height. Up front, I've also got an SW Motec tank bag. That one's waterproof, meaning the zips are a bit stiffer. The rear bag isn't waterproof, but this Rear Bag Pro has an inner liner that keeps my clothes dry. Brilliant. It's handled strong vibrations and loads of dust exposure perfectly well. Speaking of vibrations and dust exposure, just for the sake of completeness, I should mention that we haven't had a single minor issue, fault or error message of any kind. Nothing at all on the Suzuki. Everything flawless. I just noticed, as always, you know how it is with a new motorbike, we took it over with 0 kilometers on the clock. We'll need to tension the chain at some point. You'll know that too when you buy a new bike in the first 1000 kilometers. So we'll probably have to get the tools out here once. But otherwise, of course, it's sailing through the test flawlessly. Possibly I'd fit a larger windscreen. For the lower speed levels here, this windscreen is fine. Looks great and also gives me clear space for the view ahead. I like it a lot. Okay, my friend is getting bored back there. He wants to carry on riding. We've still got a decent stint ahead of us today. I've talked a lot about the Suzuki now. If you want to find out everything about the USA, the 4 states, Yellowstone National Park, that's coming in another video. Subscribe to the channel, then you'll get all the info, the full travel experiences. And well, I think that's it, folks. Thanks a lot for your interest. Suzuki V-Strom 800DE riders, as always, be brutally honest down below, no sugarcoating. How do you like the video? Have I told the truth? Does it match your experience? Have you got long-term impressions that are different? We've done plenty of testing here, but not 50,000 kilometers. So please post your experiences down below and let us know if they differ from mine. Thanks a lot, cheers, and see you soon on 1000 PS TV.